Hey everyone, it's Evan and Irma here and the crew from NextMed. Really excited about this discussion today. We have Daniel Kraft, we have Paul Stamets, and really an incredible agenda. Daniel, maybe introduce yourself, the team at NextMed Health, and our guest today, Paul.
Great. Thank you so much, Evan. Hi, Dr. Daniel Kraft. I'm a physician scientist and sometimes an accidental futurist, and also the founder and chair of NextMed.Heath, which is a program that brings together folks from all around the world to look at the convergence of technologies, innovation to enable us to rethink and reimagine healthcare around the planet. So you can go to NextMed.Health. Here's some airplanes. And what we're all about at NextMed.Health is, bringing the future faster in healthcare across the whole spectrum, everything from gene editing and digital health to psychedelics and beyond. So I'm really excited to have my friend and co-conspirator, Paul Stamets, I think the world's leading mycologist and instigator in the field, and to share with us a bit of what he'll be talking about at NextMed.Health, March 13th to 16th in San Diego at the magical Hotel del Coronado. So Paul, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. There's many great mycologists out there, okay? But we're all, just like in medicine, we have silos of expertise. And so I have a hyper focus on psilocybin mushrooms and on medicinal mushrooms.
And we've been lucky to have Paul at the prior version of NextMed.Health, Exponential Medicine. I think he's frozen at the moment. So I'll riff for a moment in that, many folks in healthcare, I'm an oncologist by background, get very, heads down in their field. And there's so much happening, whether it's with ChatGPT or psychedelics for mental health and beyond, or what's happening with AI, robotics, nanotech, genomics, that the magic often happens when you bring people together outside of their normal spheres to sort of look at the future together and to catalyze it in new ways. And so that's the theme at NextMed.Health. And as hopefully Paul will join us again. You guys have any leads on the AI is easy, AV is hard section?
Well, we'll take him down, and hopefully he'll join us back in a moment. But Daniel, give us a little history on exponential medicine, which became NextMed, this amazing community of innovators and practitioners and entrepreneurs. We met a number of years back, but there are many folks new to the team, and tell us why people should attend.
Well, if you're interested at all in what's now, near, and next in health and medicine, whether you're a human, a patient, a clinician, a biotech person, anybody is now, I think, super involved in healthcare, certainly in the setting of the pandemic. And exponential medicine, which I ran and founded for 10 years, really was the nidus of breaking open those silos and ideas and people and mindsets to bring the future faster. And now post-pandemic, we rebooted that and rebranded it to NextMed.Health, not just to be the annual event at the Hotel Del, but more of a physical, virtual, blended hybrid, just like healthcare has become more blended through the pandemic. We're not always meeting in person. We're having a combination of the two. And so with NextMed.Health, we're kind of creating, again, that anchor of ideas, technology, people, and amazing faculty like Paul Stamets, folks like David Sinclair, who joined us, will be on a future episode on the future of health and longevity. Mike Snyder from Stanford, who's been developing the check engine light for the body and multi-omics, and where you can take wearable technology. Ron Baliser from Israel out of Clalit, who done amazing work on validating the COVID vaccines as well as proactive personalized care. I won't run through our entire faculty. If you go to nextmed.health/faculty, you'll find who's coming this year. But the history is most medical meetings, most healthcare meetings are very, very topic specific. We're kind of combining them together. And Jim, you've been there. Maybe you can speak to your experience.
Yeah, well, as a conference speaker, I've been to more than 2,500 conferences, both speaking and participating over the last 30 years. And I have to say, NextMed was the best conference in my entire career. It's just literally mind-blowing about how the technology is integrating with real-time diagnostics and getting to really preventative healthcare. So we are at such an exciting juncture here. And I see Paul's back.
Paul, you're back. Thanks for rejoining. We were just in the middle of introductions. We were so rudely interrupted by the internet. So mainly you could dive back in and introduce your work and your mission.
Over to you, Paul.
Okay, I'm sorry. We have a unstable internet connection, which is surprising to me. So I'm calling in from Washington State, where I live at a 20-acre waterfront, which I spend a lot of my time. So I've been involved in psilocybin mushrooms virtually all my life, all my young adult life. I first became fascinated when I was about 14 years of age. So there's a great book. I don't know if it's Joseph Campbell or somebody wrote The Crack in the Cosmic Egg. And I think a lot of us scientists have gone through this period where we're so immersed into a subject as a cacophony of data, and we work decades on something. And then things just become sort of like out of the ether, we have these epiphanies, and I'm very blessed to have had a few epiphanies that I think will be extraordinarily interesting and applicable to improving mental health and using psilocybin mushrooms. And so I'm very excited to be involved at NextMed with my brother Daniel, and we have some breaking research that will be revealed at this conference. But I like to put things into context because it's so important that we give credit where credit is due. And I have a little prop here. So this is really the event that brought psilocybin mushrooms to the forefront of modern Western elsewhere in the world. But May 13th, 1957, millions of copies of Life magazine arrived on Americans' doorsteps, and inside was a complete field guide with beautiful watercolors, taxonomically accurate, of psilocybin mushrooms found in Oaxaca, Mexico. And we know of this really because of the generosity and kindness of Maria Sabina, and who was a Mazatec shaman who opened up her home, literally, and helped the Wassons, R. Gordon Wasson and Valentina Wasson. Now, Valentina Wasson was a medical doctor from Russia, and R. Gordon Wasson was a banker. He was mycophobic, she was mycophilic. They invented those words. But Maria Sabina also was not only a shaman, but she was a mycologist. This is important to know. She would go out into the wilds and the mountains of Oaxaca, collect psilocybin mushrooms for ceremony. Now, for those of you who have not gone out hunting mushrooms, this is not an easy thing. You really have to be very hyper-focused. You need to understand which ones are the ones you're seeking, the psilocybin mushrooms, the close lookalikes, the deadly ones. This is not something for amateurs. So I'd like to emphasize that Maria Sabina was not only a shaman, she was a mycologist. And moreover, Valentina Wasson was also a mycologist. She knew mushrooms by Latin binomials. She taught R. Gordon Wasson. So it's from these two very powerful women that were instrumental in bringing this knowledge to the forefront of Western culture. When this magazine came out, as you can imagine, tens of thousands of people flocked to Oaxaca to try to find Maria Sabina, because the descriptions in this magazine were just extraordinary. And R. Gordon Wasson's agreement with Life magazine, so it's been reported that they can't change any text, but Life magazine reserved the right for the title. So the editors of Life magazine coined magic mushrooms, from what I know. So then this got people from Harvard and Yale and Stanford, scientists really interested. And then Albert Hofmann synthesized psilocybin, find the active ingredient inside the psilocybin mushrooms. And then Albert Hofmann, who also discovered LSD, was the first one to synthesize it in Switzerland. Well, it soon, not that soon, but 2 or 3 decades later, it was discovered that these psilocybin mushrooms grow in Washington State, Oregon, Northern California. But they grow in other places too. So I would like to show just 3 slides, if I could, just for context here. And I don't see my slideshow, so you're going to have to advance it for me. If you could show the first slide.
Oh, I think you have to present those, Paul. But
All right.
as you're chatting here, because you logged in again, how often do you spend in the field versus in the lab? Or
Okay, it's okay. It's uploading again. Okay, all right. So here we go. So my brother John went to Yale, and he came and during one of his breaks, he went down to Mexico, Colombia, came back with these amazing stories of psilocybin mushrooms. I worship my older brother John, and so being 14 and him being 19 or 20, I got fascinated by the subject, and I went on and started teaching myself everything I could learn about psilocybin mushrooms. I published my first book on psilocybin mushrooms 44 years ago.
wow.
Think of that. 44 years ago, I published my first book. And there's my brother John and my mother, both of whom have now passed on. And this began, my book was basically how to accurately identify psilocybin mushrooms, because I've been trained in taxonomy and how to use taxonomic keys. And by a process of elimination, you can narrow down to the species of interest. So now, to keep this in perspective, also, there's 118 universities and institutions currently registered at clinicaltrials.gov. There seems to be a few more every week or every 2 weeks that are approved for clinical trials on psilocybin. Now, Stanford, Harvard, Purdue, you keep on, it's a who's who of the most prestigious medical universities in the world. So now consider these went through IRB boards. Daniel knows all about this, institutional review boards, and they're juried by scientists and physicians and also ethics to follow several criteria that need to be important. One, it's unlikely to do harm. Two, it addresses a critical medical need not currently being adequately addressed by conventional medicines. Three, that's scalable. You don't want to invent a medicine that's so out of far reach that no one can use it. Now, there are other criteria as well. And so the fact that these institutional review boards looked at the data, looked at the evidence, and now there's 118 of them. This is why, Daniel, when I gave a talk at your last conference, and you announced, I remember this very clearly, you announced that Paul's going to talk on psilocybin mushrooms. There were 5 or 6 physicians that sneered, actually vocally sneered at the mention of psilocybin mushrooms. And then I got up on stage, and it was like they were deer in headlights, right? They did not know, and many of the other physicians were already up the learning curve. But now that chasm has vastly decreased. I just gave a talk in Miami, albeit it's a little bit of a selective audience. I asked how many people in the audience have not taken psilocybin mushrooms. Out of 800 people, 6 people raised their hands. 6. This has become the zeitgeist of our time. This is a wave. It's a revolution, not only in academia, it's a revolution of the people rising up from, wanting to have this. So I will show you another slide here. I only have 3 of these. So let's see if I can go up again. This is in the United States, and I also included Canada, and I mentioned the Bahamas, Netherlands, Portugal, and now, just in this past week, Australia. These are the states that have ballots or bills that have been moved forward to legalize or decriminalize psilocybin, and also create the structure for therapeutic use. So this is amazing to have now 22 states. So for those who are unaware, this is not a giant movement in academia. This is a movement across our culture. And oops, I can't show that one. So the preponderance of evidence coming out in peer-reviewed journals with some of these clinical studies that have been published clearly shows that they're game changers in breaking cycles of addiction or behavior that people are sort of enslaved to this rote response. And it's a sad fact of life, from everything that I've read, that people who are abused as children oftentimes have a propensity to become abusers themselves. This is a learned behavior. So breaking that cycle of violence can be breaking a generational, influence of abuse, as well as you're treating yourself, of course. And so our research is really focused on neurogenesis, And that's what we're really excited to present at NextMed.
Perfect.
So I'll just stop there.
Paul, fantastic for that opening summary. Clearly you mentioned many traditional clinicians. I trained as a traditional MD. I don't think it was ever mentioned in our pharmacology or psychiatry courses 20-something years ago at Stanford. Now there's this, as you mentioned, this zeitgeist, this movement, MAPS that you've been involved with, going through proper clinical trials, starting with MDMA and others. Can you kind of just a brief synthesis of what the evidence to date is there for psilocybin, to focus specifically on its medicinal benefits in psychiatry?
Okay, I like the history and the mindset of medical breakthroughs. And what physicians oftentimes, they have an unusual patient and they don't know how to treat them, and the patient does something experimental and they come back with this incredible change in their life, and the physician goes, okay, I'm curious, is this just random, or did they actually do something that we physicians were not aware of? Well, this has been happening for thousands of years. Maria Sabina being an example. The psilocybin mushrooms vastly improve mental health and for people to deal with grief, trauma, PTSD, etc. The clinical trials that have been published to date, and you may think they're disparate, but actually there is a common theme here. The clinical trials against treatment-resistant depression, Compass Pathways and Imperial College, they've led the charge on that. There's another one going on at Yale, the University of Wisconsin-Madison with USONA. This is showing very, very strong signals for breaking treatment-resistant depression, which is by definition, I think, 2 or 3 medical prescriptions have been unsuccessful in dealing with people's depression. And there's a significant improvement in reducing depression, reducing anxiety, and these have been game changers. Now, the other sort of out there in the metaverse, and there are major meta studies that have been surveyed, and now there are clinical trials that are coming out, and some of the meta studies out there, and I highly recommend an app that's available for your iPhone, your Droid. It's available at microdose.me. You can download it. We published 2 papers in Nature, scientific reports. On this data, we have over 24,000 people reporting. So this is the type of signal that clinicians want to say, well, what's out there? And so the signals that we were before the clinical trials were done is, wow, I know somebody who drinks alcohol, did psilocybin mushrooms, they stopped drinking alcohol. Oh, I know somebody who smoked cigarettes, all their life. They did one psilocybin session, they stopped smoking cigarettes. Well, both of those examples are clinically now proven. 70% reduction in tobacco, with people being tobacco free after 1 or 2 sessions of psilocybin 1 year later. I mean, nicotine is one of the most addictive drugs out there. Binge drinking just came out as in a peer-reviewed journal, placebo-based, controlled, for binge drinking. Massive reduction for binge drinking from 1 or 2 psilocybin sessions, high doses. The other things that have come out is nature relatedness. And many of us who do psilocybin mushrooms, we want to be better Earth citizens. We want to take care of nature, the ecosystem. Okay, so those are all clinical studies that have been published with good controls. And there's 118 that have been put up at clinicaltrials.gov. You can look for things like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, across the gamut. The interesting ones that I find to be really fascinating, which have not been clinically proven, but are part of surveys. And the common denominator that amplifies out the level of significance is a reduction in partner-to-partner violence. Think of that. Partner-to-partner violence. With 250,000 inmates that were surveyed, if psilocybin was strongly associated with a reduction of burglary, theft, also violent crime. So start thinking about this. Wow, this is really, really fascinating. So we're seeing these again, and this is why the microdose.me survey is so important, because we can then, with thousands and thousands of people reporting, not just one person that you knew, but when you have a big data sets like this, then physicians can harvest the data and look for signal amongst the noise to design their clinical trials. So the clinical trials that are really, really interesting to me is, and the one that has me most excited right now is breaking opioid addiction. And opioid use disorder, OUD, as it's known. And all of us know people and families have been devastated by opioids. I mean, I don't think anybody listening here doesn't know somebody. And from one psilocybin experience, you can break addictive behavior. Okay, so the common theme is alcoholism, opioid use disorder, cigarettes, nicotine, reduction in violence, criminal behavior, better Earth citizens, more concerned about the family. I believe psilocybin makes nicer people, more pleasant people to be around. And like a pebble in the pond of goodness, then those stories emanate out into society. And that's what we're seeing now, is that people's horribly depressed or horribly addicted, and they've tried everything else. And then sort of through the underground, now in the overground, let's bring them in and with skilled therapists, very safe settings, to see if we can help them resolve this lifelong challenge they've had, which has been unsuccessfully met by conventional medicine. So that's it's a game changer.
So to be a game changer, you need clinical proof. And as you mentioned, now these clinical trials have evolved and gone through the IRBs and have, the appropriate setting. Obviously, there are folks who use some of these substances recreationally, but now you're able to crowdsource that with microdose.me for the microdosing side. If we're going to go into next, the theme of NextMed.Heath is what's coming next. What would you be your sort of futurist mycologist hat about where we might be in the next 5 or 10 years as this matures and these can be, really scaled to impact and outside of the initial anecdotal and now trials to come into practice?
Okay, my partner says, answer the question directly. I always like, I want to give you some context. I've been embedded in this field, as you know, for 48 years or longer. I'm 67 years young right now. It's strange. I went to my doctor. I'm on no meds at all because you're unusual. I have no prescriptions. Never have. But I'm not sure if I my use of psilocybin or not. But so my silo of specialty is mushrooms and psilocybin and medicinal mushrooms. I'm not a physician. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I think it sometimes takes somebody who has a skill set that's related to the subject but outside the field to push the envelope, to ask questions and dare to be wrong, dare to be right. I am self-employed. I don't have to worry about tenure, so I can be adventurous in my thinking. And many of my thoughts don't bear any fruit, so to speak. But some of them do. And this is what we've come to, and this is what we're so excited to present at NextMed. Psilocybin and the tryptamines related to psilocybin, these are legal psilocybin analogs, so to speak, activate nerves to regrow. And it was thought that after a certain age, in the mid-20s, you had no newborn, nerve cells in the hippocampus and elsewhere. We have very strong evidence that the psilocybin tryptamines and the psilocybin activates what are called MAP kinases. These are proteins that are receptors that then that create nerve growth factors and BDNF, brain neurotropic factors, that stimulate nerves to regenerate. So what we have very compelling evidence, and we need to prove this clinically, and that's why we have a clinical trial in Parkinson's in the not too distant future, is that these psilocybin analogs and psilocybin stimulate your nervous system to regenerate newborn neurons, to create synaptogenesis, neuroplasticity, and to cause new neurons to be created in the hippocampus and throughout the central and peripheral nervous system. So what I see in the future is this being a nootropic vitamin for microdosing, that we can become smarter as we become older. We can reduce neurodegeneration, because new news to everybody, as you get older, you suffer from neuropathy. You have neurodegeneration. How many elders fall, break their hips, go to the hospital, get an infection and die? That's a very common story. If we can reduce falling, if we can increase the intelligence of our elders so they can pass on this knowledge to the next generation and prevent Alzheimer's and dementia, think about the body intellect benefit to our society. We're losing Einsteins every single day due to dementia and neurodegeneration. If we can prevent 10%, improve, 10% less people fall, people don't go into dementia. What jewel of knowledge and coincidence of an elder passing knowledge to a younger scientist, and I wonder how many scientists on their deathbed went, damn, I wish I was able to tell them that before, whoops. So evolution goes on a different path. I really think that it's a game changer. I think we could become nicer people, more intelligent, and I think that all these cycles of addiction are related to neurological health. And with having new neurological pathways, neuroplasticity, more connections in the brain, healthier nerves, less neuroinflammation, I just think it informs all aspects of medicine. So that's what I see.
It's certainly exciting, and it seems to be accelerating. And just maybe in the last few minutes, maybe your commentary on the good and the pluses and minuses of this almost being commercialized. Many new startups, lots of venture money coming into the space, big pharma getting into this element. Where do we kind of match sort of the new knowledge and the ability to translate this in safe, effective ways, and the sort of for lack of a better term, business model, so this becomes something safe and effective and utilized within traditional healthcare as well?
Well, we've been in stealth mode. I've created a new company with my colleagues, our co-founders. It's Myco Life Sciences is a public benefit corporation. The advantage of public benefit corporation is your priority is not for the return and the investment to the investors. You can use the priority of social benefit that supersedes the return of the investment money by investors. I don't see those as in contradiction. I think that rising tide raises all boats. And the important thing, I have two sort of adamant principles. Number one, I think it's a basic human civil right that you should have the freedom to your own consciousness, period, right? That should be a fundamental civil right. Two, these medicines are so important for curing the ills of society. They should be made available to everyone who can afford them, and those who cannot afford them, those who can should subsidize the ability of access for those people who can't afford them. If you reduce crime in the inner city, I mean, just think of that. It could just start healing. And I know several law enforcement officers who have been changed from psilocybin. And I've just verified this with a judge in Florida who I told him this story, and I'd like to share it with you because I think it's important. In Vancouver, BC, where the TED conference is, there's at least 10 stores that sell psilocybin, advertise it. And it's illegal, but it's extremely low priority of law enforcement. One of the reasons being is many of the law enforcement officers have suffered trauma and PTSD. They're looking oftentimes, dealing with very difficult people, and they become callous. And in the United States in particular, unfortunately, the reputation of law enforcement to be aggressive and mean and intimidating and, throw people down and it's an alpha male response, frankly. Sorry, man. But what's happened in British Columbia, I talked to several RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers, and they were traumatized from things that they saw, things they witnessed, things they don't want to talk about. They did high doses psilocybin with other RCMPers, other law enforcement officers. They reconciled and they changed their entire behavior. And so this one friend of mine said, well, what does that mean? I goes, well, we used to go up and we had to arrest somebody. We were just really mean and tough and, aggressive. I go, yeah. I said, what do you do now? He says, well, now we go looking like this. We smile. And we go and we smile and we walk up to the person in a very non-aggressive way, casual way. And we say, how you doing, brother? How you doing, sister? And they say, well, a little nervous. You're a police officer. Well, okay. And then they say, well, I have good news and I have bad news. What do you want to hear first? And they said, invariably, everyone wants to hear the good news. It's very surprising. Give me the good news first. And they say, well, you can finish your coffee. You can finish your lunch. You can finish what you're doing. What's the bad news? I got to arrest you. And they said the change of that approach, the people they're arresting are cooperative, they're friendly, They're joking. They're non-aggressive in their reaction. He said it's a game changer. That people do not feel threatened by the police. They feel like they have a friend who's doing their job, but they aren't mean and cruel. They're actually trying to help them to get into therapy, to become a better citizen, to resolve their criminal behavior. He said it's sweeping law enforcement. So I just was at a conference in Florida, spoke to a judge, and the judge told me, I think it's okay to say, I won't name his name, but he says, I can't believe the number of phone calls I've gotten from trusted law enforcement officers who wanted to get access to psilocybin. It is fundamentally changing law enforcement. Wow. That's one example. I have 20 of this, but I think that's really profound. I think psilocybin is a game changer across all levels of our society. I think it'll make us better citizens, nicer people, more intelligent people, more dexterous people. So I'm excited. Can you tell?
I can tell. Well, thank you, Paul, for your great work here. I think it has the potential to augment our cognitive abilities, to manage past traumas, and to, again, make not just better police officers, but folks with more empathy and connection to the earth and planet. And hopefully, as you mentioned, even impact falls and downstream medical costs that are related to our sometimes failed neurogenesis. So a really exciting time, and a kind of a great example of what's coming next in health and medicine. So I'm really grateful you'll be joining us at NextMed.Health next month in San Diego. And any parting thoughts for our listeners?
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Paul. I'm just imagining meeting you in person versus this lousy video chat that we're all so abused by these days. So you can't beat face-to-face interaction and lectures and learning. And we're so excited. And I guess I know you have to run top of the hour, but any final thoughts?
Well, just a final thought, folks. Nature provides, I don't. So don't hit me up for psilocybin mushrooms. I've just been approved by the government to possess psilocybin. And so I always felt like I've been watched, under the microscope. So I am strictly compliant with the laws of the United States. The closing thoughts, I want just to applaud Daniel for being on the cutting edge to allow these sometimes provocative ideas to move to the forefront. I think it's just clearly the super majority of physicians are trying to help patients for the right reasons. But they face just a quagmire of confusing symptomologies and cofactors and genomics and microbiome influences. And I just really understand now how challenging it is for physicians to try to meet the needs of their patients. But what NextMed and what Daniel Kraft's history has been is to advance ideas like this. Let them be vetted, let them be challenged, let the clinical trials prove. But we have to push the envelope. And it's always the minorities in science, the minorities in cultures that are the leading edge of change. And the protection of minorities in science and who have different points of view. And I think, personally, the minorities of our culture. This is why biodiversity and biosecurity are intimately related, because the more we support biodiversity and the minorities of opinion, we'll get quantum leaps in the advancement of our species at a time critical where we need to come up with better ways of behavior. I think psilocybin is a game changer across the entire planet.
I love the idea of biodiversity. That's kind of a bit of the theme of NextMed Health, is we have a diversity of minds, ideas, cross collaborations, and it's at that interface, whether it's crowdsourcing, microdosing on an app that gets published in Nature, or tying new neuroimaging technologies to maybe what you're studying. It all becomes hopefully something that'll move healthcare and health across the planet. So thank you, Brother Paul, and we'll see you next month in San Diego at NextMed Health.
All right.
Bye, Paul.
See you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you
Take
so
care,
much.
everybody. All right.
Thanks.
Be courageous. Be kind. All right.
Well, that was fantastic, Daniel. So it's hard to believe Paul's only one speaker at NextMed, and I could spend 2-3 days just listening to Paul, learning from Paul. But in summary, who else do you have lined up? Because it's an amazing faculty, an amazing lineup of speakers.
Well, the theme is not just medicine, NextMed, but also health. And I think there's a new interest in not just doing the sick care model, kind of very intermittent data, very reactive, wait for someone to get sick and then try and cure them with often challenging approaches, but to even think about precision wellness. So we're going to have Leroy Hood joining us as our opening keynote on day one. Leroy Hood is kind of one of the fathers of sequencing. A lot of the genomic technologies came from his lab in mind out of Seattle. And he's now been opening up this idea of precision wellness or phenomics, kind of the ability to create your digital twin from your digital exhaust and your microbiome and your genome and start to help predict and push folks to wellness and health rather than wait for disease. So I think that's a bit of a through line for NextMed of how do we take these new forms of data, microbiome, genome, digitome, sociome, neurome, and put them together so we can really drive not just the sick care model, but the healthcare model. So that's one element. We'll have, as I mentioned earlier, Mike Snyder, chair of genetics at Stanford, doing some really interesting work blending wearable data. His lab showed that your Apple Watch can predict that you have COVID 2 days before you're symptomatic, but also now new work where they're taking just a drop of blood from essentially him every few hours and doing deep multiomics and really understanding what's happening with health and disease over time, as opposed to the small snapshots we have. We'll have folks looking at video games for the brain, companies like Deepwell Therapeutics. That's another sort of big challenge exacerbated by the pandemic. How do we think differently about mental health? Does it require psychedelics? Video gaming can be applied in that realm. Even digital therapeutics on the market. We'll have a theme and a session on digital health with Parisa Vatanka from Digital.Health, with folks like Dave Albert, the founder of AliveCore, who's taken the concept of an EKG on your phone case and now that to the point where they're getting millions of EKGs a day. So the faculty is really diverse. We'll have Ken Dykewell talking about the future of the age wave and the implications for our aging society. We'll have sessions on the future of diagnostics. Mary Lou Jepson is going to join. She's doing some amazing work, shrinking basically an MRI type technology to something that you can wear. We'll be looking at genomics. The chair of Genomics England, Baroness Nicola Blackwood, will be diving into omics of all sorts. And so really, the kind of the magic of NextMed is having these sorts of faculty and the participants bump into each other at the beach. We have a silent disco. We'll have our beach bonfires, and you really start to interface and sort of see the cutting edge and future in new ways with folks like Paul Stamets in the mix as well, and about 60 startups and early stage companies in our innovation lab. So if you have a early stage company or something that's doing something novel, could be a new version of virtual reality, augmented reality for telemedicine, or a 3D printed medical device. We have an innovation lab with about 60 incredible companies highlighting what they're doing, and you get to sort of touch and feel the future as well. And if you have an innovation, come bring it and apply on the website.
Oh, that's exciting. I know Jim and I spend a lot of time in the non-healthcare world of tech and IT, but it seems like these worlds are colliding, right, Jim? I mean, healthcare is infused in everything from the automotive industry to wearables to your desktop and mobile phone these days. And Jim, so what do you see from the broader tech perspective on the importance of healthcare? In every aspect of our life, not just in a narrow sense.
Well, Evan, whenever I get on a plane, the pilot and co-pilot test every system on that plane to make sure it's fine before we take off. But think about how we treat our healthcare. Once a year, I go see my doctor for a checkup, an annual, or if I have a problem, I go to the hospital, emerge, right? So it's, as Daniel was saying, it's reactive. It's not predictive maintenance of my health. So these new technologies, there was, this is not a major topic people like talking about, but at CES this year, there was a real-time urine analysis. So you put this in the toilet bowl, you pee onto it, and it actually gives you 20 different diagnostics about your health. So how could I get to a point where with my Apple Watch, which has an ECG in it, a glucose blood monitor that sees through the skin to my veins, I could check dozens of different systems when I get up in the morning, just like an airplane pilot checks everything, so that I find out where do I get to stage 0, whether it's cancer or Alzheimer's, or, I want to get to stage 0. We're about to start having a problem and deal with it then, because in our healthcare system, more than 50% of all expenditure is in the last 6 months of our life. It's a very reactive model. I want to live well my entire life and then fall off a cliff, right? So how do we change this about? And this is one of the exciting things about NextMed. The other thing I'd want to say, Evan, is when Paul was finishing, he was talking about minorities and diversities of thought. And if you think about disruption, it comes from outside the orthodoxy. So what does, Elon Musk know about rockets? Well, absolutely nothing, but he's revolutionized SpaceX. And what did he know about the auto industry? Nothing, but he's revolutionized the electrification of the $10 trillion a year transportation market. If you study disruption over and over and over again, the disruption comes from outside the orthodoxy, because if you are an expert, you have come up through the system and it puts blinkers on you. And so we need to go to conferences like this that are going to challenge our perception, especially given in my jurisdiction, 40% of all provincial, or you'd say state, expenditure is on healthcare. It's humongous, trillions of dollars globally. How could we get better outcomes using this technology? And it's not just about the technology, it's about change management. It's about taking those blinkers off. It's about cultural change. It's about the reimbursement. I love Daniel always says, we don't practice evidence-based medicine, we practice reimbursement-based medicine. So we have to change the systems and structures. So it's not just about tech. It's about business models. It's about changing perception. It's about changing reimbursement models. So, it's a holistic approach that you're going to get at NextMed, and it's really exciting. Irma.
Hi, I think it's important to note that at NextMed.Heath, there are people in the room who are part of the system, the decision makers, the physicians. So it's not just the conference talking about the pie in the sky ideas. There are people there who can bring these outsider generated ideas into the healthcare system. They are inside the system, but can affect change, because you really need both. You need the intersection of somebody who has power to change systems from within and the ideas from people who are thinking outside of the box.
Yeah, that's spot on, because as Jim mentioned, there's lots of amazing technologies, but unless they fit into the workflow of a clinician and they're paid for and they're regulated, it's a bit of a so what. And so at NextMed, we'll have, from the payers and the big pharmas of the world to the baby startups. And in many cases, they meet early and they end up converging and accelerating that solution into a massively scaled healthcare system. So it is really about the super convergence, and also not traditional medical people are welcome. As you mentioned, many folks who are starting next generation health tech companies and solutions are coming from outside. They have been in medtech or video games or AI for other applications. They see a clinical need themselves from a family member or a community issue or themselves, and they're driven to help solve for that in new ways. So many examples of that. And NextMed.Heath, we try and bring those parties together to kind of mix and mingle and bring the future faster.
This is actually a great point about so many entrepreneurs that we work with daily and talk to daily. So much of the innovation is driven by personal experience, whether that's directly that person or their close family member, and coming up against a challenge that they then find a way to solve. And so much of entrepreneurs in healthcare are driven by this personal passion for better clinical outcomes and for better patient experience. And I think that aspect is not to be lost when we talk about innovation in healthcare.
Yeah, 100%. It's all about finding an unmet need and solving for it. Now we have all these new exponential tools, from ChatGPT to next generation wearables, which as Jim was mentioning, they can start to collect all of our data. It could be every urinalysis every time you go in the morning. But what do you do with all that data? Now we're overwhelmed already. Now we need to have that synthesis, and where sort of AI, machine learning, user interface comes together. How do you present that? I was in Dubai last week at this amazing sequencing center in Abu Dhabi. We were also with the CEO of the chief medical officer of Microsoft. We're talking about how do you now take all this genomic information, use something like ChatGPT or 4, and use that to communicate, because there's not enough genetic counselors, for example. There are not enough specialists and clinicians in many parts of the world. So I think one of our goals with NextMed.Health also is to democratize healthcare around the planet, make it more equitable. You know, what you can do with a wearable and a mobile phone and a smart chatbot won't do everything, but for the many folks who have almost no access to health information or telehealth and beyond, it can be a big game changer.
Game changer. And let's just say a word about the venue. This isn't your average conference, your average meeting. It's an extraordinary venue at the Dell in San Diego, the heart of biomedical innovation. And it's just so unique, the environment, the people, the place. So I've been looking forward to this for so long, since COVID, kept us away from getting together. And you must be really looking forward to, essentially seeing your friends, family, and beyond, right?
And be on the beach with a bonfire and talking innovation and partnerships.
It's a tribe, right? And a lot of, what's that quote? You want to go fast, go solo. You want to go far, go together. And health and medicine is such a challenge to it's often incremental. We want to make it a bit more exponential, but also bring the right people together to not just ideate, but to actualize. And what's now near next, and not just the what's new, but the how to. How do we learn from others? Well, Lucy Engelen from the Netherlands is bringing a great group of Dutch, to think about lessons. It's not like these technologies are so new anymore, but what are the lessons and bring them into reality? We'll have sessions, very forward-thinking pharmacists. How do you build the future of pharmacy, which is blending physical and virtual, whether it's 3D printing medicines or enabling the pharmacist to leverage some of these new digital tools and workflows so that your digital exhaust can be captured and leveraged, whether it's managing hypertension, mental health, or public health. So lots of opportunity, and I'm excited to see you all there.
I've never seen a Daniel Kraft keynote. That's worth the price of admission right there. That will totally, without any psilocybin, that'll blow your mind.
And let's also not forget about our best friends, the animals. They're going to be veterinary advances also on display.
Everything. It's amazing.
Just like last year, yeah.
It's just a tour de force. Well, we're up at the top of the hour, so thank you so much for joining. Thanks for participating and watching or rewatching. And really, come join us at NextMed.Health March 13th in San Diego, and we'll see you there.
Yep. All the information is on the website, NextMed.Health, and look forward to collaborating with you all in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. Thanks
you,
for watching.
Daniel. Bye, Jim.